don't think it can happen to you.
The hit-and-run chase in California, a motorcycle rider witnessing a driver slam into several cars and then speeding away.
It can happen to you within seconds, a blink of an eye.
Tonight about the man suspected of killing a woman in a hit-and-run and his plan to evade justice.
When you take your eyes off the road for just seconds, when you're driving your car, oh, yes, it can happen to you. See, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. When the sands of time will run out within your hourglass.
New at 10, a hit and run caught on video, and now a teenager and his family are looking for the driver who took off.
He was a victim of a distracted driver hitting the road while riding his motorcycle going 65 miles per hour. He nearly lost his life. Now on a crusade to help save lives and prevent someone else from becoming a victim, the creator of DistractedDriversBusted.com and now the host of this podcast, it's Howard Drescher.
All right, welcome to another show of DistractedDriversBusted.com, the podcast show. As Gina said, I'm your host, Howard Drescher. Okay, so it has been, again, a while. It seems like I get on the roll of doing these podcast shows, and then all of a sudden, I just am so exhausted. I'm tired. And believe you me, there is more than enough information out there in regards to distracted driving, DUIs, and hit and runs that I can probably have a show every day, probably for an hour every day, probably for the next 10 years, and I would never run out of material. There are so many crazy stuff and so many crazy people out there. It is just beyond control. And you just really, really don't know it until it hits you in the face. And out here in California, it just seems to be everywhere. I've seen it. I will tell you a quick story in just a little bit about it. When I talked with a traffic reporter from KTLA, Ginger Chan, I talked to her on the phone the other day. It's been a while since we have talked, and she told me about a crazy thing that happened to her on her way to work. We'll get into that, if not today, another day. Again, I'm your host, Howard Drescher, the creator of DistractedDriversBusted.com. I'm the host of this show and the podcast that you're listening to. You can follow me on Twitter at DistractedDBTV, at DistractedDBTV, and of course on Facebook, DistractedDB. You can get all the archive shows on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, Amazon, and TuneIn. Just type in the keyword DistractedDB. And yes, we do have, well, actually, no, we don't have a story from the previous show. Apparently, I deleted the audio, and so we don't have that. But I can honestly tell you this, that we have had so many crashes and so many things go wrong for people in California. And not only that, across the states. And it is getting to the point where you just really don't know when and how something is going to happen. That's why I always say, don't let anyone take the sands of time within your own hourglass. Don't let anyone take your life from you. Basically, that's what I'm saying. But yet, each and every day, there's victims out there, and the perpetrators just seem to be getting away with it. I did see a story in regards to a town and a city, and it might have been what I did last time. I'm not sure. I have to go back and check my archive show. But there is a town or a city that is actually trying to do something about it. They are putting their foot down and they're getting things done the way it should be. And maybe with that, it will help out and reduce some of the stuff, at least in their neighborhood. Today's story, oh my gosh, I have a sad story right from the get-go. This story kind of really, if this doesn't impact you in one way, shape, or form, you have no conscience and you don't care about anybody else except yourself. This story comes from ABC7. Now, before, this is where I heard the story from. And then I went to the internet And I happened to see this on YouTube, and it was all over. I mean, you're talking from local news to Good Morning America to almost every television station in America, if not around the world, was talking about this story here. And we'll get into that in a few minutes when we come back from our commercial break. Again, you're listening to DistractedDriversBusted.com, the podcast show. I am your host, Howard Drescher, the creator of DistractedDriversBusted.com. When we come back, a day that was supposed to be happy turned out not.
You're listening to the DistractedDrivers.com podcast. We'll be right back.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have arrived in Philadelphia. Local time is 3:05 p.m. and the temperature is 67 degrees. At this time, you are now free to use your cellular devices.
You know that feeling when you get to turn your phone on after the plane lands? You can have that feeling every time you drive. Make sure your cell phone is stowed away whenever you are behind the wheel.
Visit StopTextStopWrecks.org. A message brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, Project Yellow Light, and the Ad Council.
Hey, it's me, your cell phone. We need to talk about something serious. I know you love me, I know you like using me wherever you are, but I feel like this isn't working out when you're driving. I know you may think that it's possible to focus both on me and the road, but I just don't feel the same way. I think we should spend time away from each other when you're driving. It's for the best.
Visit StopTextStopWrecks.org. A message brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, Project Yellow Light, and the Ad Council.
Honey! Are you ready to go to the party? We're late.
What? Yeah, don't worry. I'll be ready in 5 minutes, babe.
Really? Can you get off the phone? I'm already ready. We're going to be late.
Yeah. Don't worry. I'm almost done.
Let's go. Come on.
Oh, okay, honey. Let's go.
Can you be ready next time? I feel like I'm always ragging on you to get ready for these types of parties.
Yeah.
Isn't the man supposed to be waiting on the lady anyway?
I'm sorry, babe. I know I say this all the time, but I promise. Next time, I really promise next time I'll be ready, and I'll be ready to go by the time you get home.
Gosh.
Let me see who that is. I'm waiting to see if my friend is actually going to be at this party.
No! Leave your phone alone. You know that scared me last time. You nearly hit someone walking in a crosswalk.
What? No, you're crazy. Look, I told you don't tell me what to do. I got this.
Stop the car. Stop it now. I just can't be with someone who doesn't care about my life, not to mention their own.
Babe, wait, come back. This isn't happening, is it?
Now, back to the DistractedDrivers.com podcast.
All right, welcome back to DistractedDriversBusted.com, the podcast show. I'm your host, Howard Drescher, the creator of DistractedDriversBusted.com, and of course, now this podcast show. You can follow me on Twitter at DistractedDBTV, at DistractedDBTV, and of course on Facebook, DistractedDB. And you can get the shows on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, Amazon, and TuneIn. And I appreciate everyone who has listened to me and still continue to listen to me. I believe, and I have to check the records, and I was unfortunately not able to do that. I believe I got a couple new states that have been chiming in and tuning in to Distracted Drivers Busted, the podcast show. I do have a couple of different countries for sure. Canada has stepped up, and I have yet to get Australia, but I do have Germany. Somebody in Germany and Canada has downloaded and listened to our podcast show. So a big round of applause there. Thank you. Not much of a applause there. Applause, I should say. Okay, so here's a story. Again, this really puts your levels of humanity at the tip of the spear. Are you or are you not going to have any feelings about this story here? And again, this story comes from ABC7 here in Los Angeles. And as I said, it is actually all over the states. It's probably all the radio or TV stations, probably some radio stations have been talking about it. I mean, it was on the local news everywhere, and Good Morning America has picked it up. And I just happened to see this based on what I saw on YouTube after I found this initial story on ABC7 here in Los Angeles, and I appreciate them for allowing me to use the sound.
Terrible crash kills a woman just hours after she and her husband said, "I do." 34-year-old Samantha Miller and her husband were leaving their wedding reception in South Carolina, seen here in this photo. They were being driven home in a golf cart when that cart was hit by a car that was traveling at a high rate of speed. Police say the woman behind the wheel was drunk.
She literally ran into my daughter going 65 miles an hour because Sam and Eric were on the back of the golf cart. And so she basically just ran into my child.
The woman behind the wheel, 25-year-old Jamie Komorowski, is facing several charges, including DUI and reckless homicide. Witnesses say the force of the impact threw the cart more than 100 yards. It rolled several times. Her husband and another family member both suffered severe injuries as well. A GoFundMe has been set up now to help pay for burial and medical costs.
All right, and I appreciate ABC7 for allowing me to use the sound. I got to tell you, though, that it seems very bizarre and very unfortunate, but yet there are circumstances within that actually set everything up in motion. One, the 25-year-old female drinking that time of day, so wasted, she hit them on a golf cart. Okay? It is so disturbing that people are drinking and driving and acting like they're drinking a bottled water or they're drinking soda or some coffee or anything that is a non-alcoholic beverage. But that's how it appears to me. And I'm telling you this because of the fact that I see it each and every day when I drive down the road. I've seen it, and I was nearly hit the other day about it, where this lady was drinking some kind of beverage, and she swerved in my lane and almost hit me in my car. I happened to be glancing over because I seen her coming up from behind on a 3 or 4 car lane, highway lane, and she was just keep swerving over. Then she realized what she's doing. She's back over, and then she's back over in my lane, back over there. I eventually just got tired of it, and I slowed down and let her pass. And I guess that was the time that she was weaving more to the right and almost hit me. And she just kept on going. And I'm thinking to myself, my gosh, what at this time of day, why, how can this happen? Are you drinking that early, or are you coming in from being that late? Because this is like at 9 o'clock in the morning as I was driving into work. I just don't get it anymore. And it kind of terrifies me to be on the highway. It terrifies me mostly when I'm on the highway and I don't know the person that is coming up on and behind me, if they're paying attention. More so when we're all at a stop, like in a gridlock, and I don't know that person is paying attention, or are they just going to slam right into the back of me? But being that drunk, that time of day, there's something wrong with you. And she's only 25, and she has multiple charges pending. South Carolina is not joking around about this kind of stuff. And quite honestly, I don't think that they should be. And maybe I'm wrong. I am me. DM me. You guys know how to get in touch with me. I've had several conversations with many of you, talking about different things that I should say, things that I probably shouldn't have said. And I appreciate that. But when is enough enough? Tell me. If you can tell me when enough is enough, I'll stop doing this show. I will stop doing this podcast, and I'll do a sports entertainment, political, or whatever the case might be. Give me a week. when no one in any state gets a DUI, hit and run, caught texting and driving, being a distracted driver, and every news station says, what an amazing week we've had. There has been no fatalities, no nothing. And then I might stop doing this podcast show. But in the meantime, each and every day, sometimes 3 or 4 news stories are about somebody doing something stupid. And yet, people just, it doesn't affect me. We move on. No, it does affect you in some way, shape, or form. It may not now, but it can be down the road. Because that person behind you or to the left of you or to the right of you, you don't know if they're paying attention, or they texting and driving, or could they be sleeping and driving, and like in some vehicles that they do nowadays. You don't know what's going to happen. And for the love of me, I just really, really getting to the point where it's just has got to change. And I just don't see change happening. If change would happen, then maybe I can change. I'll do something different. Maybe have a fun podcast once in a while. All right, you're listening to DistractedDriversBusted.com, the podcast show. When I come back, a mother who lost her life. We'll be back right after this.
You're listening to the DistractedDrivers.com podcast. We'll be right back.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have arrived in Philadelphia. Local time is 3:05 p.m. and the temperature is 67 degrees. At this time, you are now free to use your cellular devices.
You know that feeling when you get to turn your phone on after the plane lands? You can have that feeling every time you drive. Make sure your cell phone is stowed away whenever you are behind the wheel.
Visit StopTextStopWrecks.org. A message brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, Project Yellow Light, and the Ad Council.
Wake up and text. Text and eat. Text and catch the bus. Text and miss your stop. Wait. Text and be late to work.
Sorry, I'm late.
Text and work. Text and pretend to work. Text and act surprised when someone calls you out for not working.
Who, me?
Text and meet up with a friend you haven't seen in forever.
Hi. Oh, hey.
Text and complain that they're on their phone the whole time. Text and listen to them complain that you're on your phone the whole time. Text and whatever. But when you get behind the wheel, give your phone to a passenger. Put it in the glove box. Just don't text and drive. Visit StopTextsStopWrecks.org. A public service announcement brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
Now, back to the DistractedDrivers.com podcast.
All right, welcome back to DistractedDriversBusted.com, the podcast show. I'm your host, Howard Drescher. I haven't got any DMs yet, but usually they come a little bit after the show. But you can follow me on Twitter at DistractedDBTV, at DistractedDBTV, and of course on Facebook, DistractedDB. And if you're looking to find out anything about all our past archive shows, iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, Amazon, and TuneIn. Just use the keyword DistractedDB, and that will get you all the information you need. Okay, PCH, out here in California, Pacific Coast Highway. It's really close to the ocean, as you can get by the name of it. They have a nice area there where crashes, DUIs, hit and runs rarely happen there. It's a very nice tourist area. And if you ever get the opportunity to head out there, please feel free to go ahead and do that. I think it's something important that you should do. A mother lost her life the other day. And 2 people were hospitalized after alleged DUI driver sends cars flying off the part of the PCH. And this happened a few weeks ago. And it was brought to my attention because of the fact that the vehicle that flew off of the road and into the bottom of the ravine, or where the ocean would start, landing on rocks, a mother lost her life. The perpetrator, 21 years old. 21 years old. It is so disturbing, this story. I want to thank KTLA right up front, letting them know I appreciate the sound that they provided. And here's that story from KTLA Channel 5.
A young mother is dead after a suspected DUI driver slammed into parked cars along PCH in Pacific Palisades. That crash injured the woman's teenage son and best friend.
Yeah, the impact was so powerful, it sent pedestrians and vehicles flying onto the sand and surf below. Chris Wolf is live in the Palisades tonight, where he spoke with the victim's friends and family. Chris?
That's right, Rick and Sandy. The woman who survived lost her cell phone out here, and family members were trying to find that for her today. The victims never saw this coming.
Mangled metal, sharp rocks, police and paramedics. A life lost, and others that will never be the same. An early morning trip to the calming Southern California coast was not supposed to end this way. Investigators with the LAPD say a young man believed to be under the influence of alcohol or drugs was driving southbound on Pacific Coast Highway near Sunset Boulevard around 12:45 a.m. Saturday morning. He lost control, slammed into 3 parked cars along the beach, catapulting 2 of them down onto the rocks and people below the roadway. James Gallardo was nearby and called 911.
I was sitting in my car and I heard like tire screeches and it sounded like another car hit another car, and I ran out here to see what happened. I seen this.
Family and friends tell us a 33-year-old woman was killed instantly. Her son, a teenager, was injured, along with her best friend, another woman in her 30s. They were taken to the hospital. A photographer captured the arrest of the suspected DUI driver as he was given a field sobriety test and then cuffed. Authorities have not released the man's identity, but say he is 21 years old.
I feel bad for the kid that was yelling for his mom. Apparently, his mom is the one who got hit.
Family and friends of the victims visited the crash site Saturday evening, looking for personal belongings. They did not feel comfortable talking on camera, but shared information with us. The victims were visiting Pacific Palisades to enjoy the beach under the moonlight. And then the unimaginable happened. The woman who was killed was the mother of a small child and teenage son. His condition is unclear. The woman who survived suffered serious back injuries and a broken wrist. People who frequent this area are stunned by the deadly crash.
We have a lot of tourists that come around here. Everybody's, checking stuff out up and down PCH, and that's just awful to hear.
The investigation continues. Anyone with information should contact the LAPD. Reporting live in Pacific Palisades, I'm Chris Wolf, KTLA 5 News.
And I want to thank KTLA Channel 5 for allowing me to use that sound. I appreciate that. It is a very disturbing, very, very disturbing story. And it kind of makes you think that you can't even go out and enjoy yourself anymore, where before somebody decides just to ruin it because they think what they're doing is way cooler, being more intoxicated, drunk, and you just got to imagine that the horror that goes into something like that. And he probably, when he crashed into those vehicles, 3 of them, 2 of them flew off the road and down the embankment onto the rocks and stuff and into the water. He probably didn't even realize what happened. Terrible. All right, here's a story, and this is from WLKY, and this is the first time we've ever used them. I want to thank them being part of the Distracted Drivers Busted family. A man who's got to pay $100,000 or a bond of $100,000 for a deadly crash that he was involved in that killed a 17-year-old. It ended up being like a 4-car pileup at a stop sign, and the guy was traveling 74 miles an hour in a 45-mile-an-hour zone, and it just doesn't make any sense. And of course, the bond even goes up even higher, I believe. Again, this is from WLKY, and I appreciate them for allowing me to use the sound.
New at noon, a judge sets bond at $100,000 for a Louisville man charged in a deadly DUI crash in Newburgh. Eric Ocampo Gonzalez was arraigned on murder and drunk driving charges this morning. Police say the 23-year-old crashed into the back of a car stopped at a red light Saturday night at the intersection of Shepherdsville Road and Newburgh Road. That caused a 4-car pileup, which killed a 17-year-old and hurt 3 other people. A toxicology test showed that Ocampo Gonzalez had a blood alcohol level of more than 4 times the legal limit. Just minutes before facing the man charged with killing her son, the mother of Mohammed Hussein prayed for justice. Dozens joined her Tuesday morning on the steps of the Hall of Justice, 10 days after his death.
All this kill it inside. Everything kill inside.
At Tuesday's hearing, Eric Ocampo Gonzalez showed no reaction to the charges against him. But for Mohammed's loved ones, the testimony proved too much. An off-duty deputy who witnessed the April 22nd crash at Shepherdsville and Newburgh Roads also became emotional.
My headlights hit the vehicles as they were struck.
Members of LMPD's traffic unit testified Ocampo Gonzalez had cans of beer in his car, smelled of alcohol, and was so inebriated when doctors reset his hip later at the hospital, he, quote, did not flinch. We also heard testimony from an accident reconstructionist who estimates at the time of the crash, Eric Ocampo Gonzalez was going at least 74 in his 45-mile-per-hour zone when he plowed into that Toyota, stopped at a red light.
We are talking about an extreme indifference to the value of human life, 4 times the legal limit, and then getting into a car where you don't have a license to drive it, you shouldn't have been driving it, and you plowed through 3 kids on Thunder.
Prosecutor Max Allen argued against lesser charges and lowering the bond. The judge ultimately sent the case to the grand jury and increased the bond from $100,000 to $500,000. Mohammed's sister says their family is grateful.
He didn't have a license and he wasn't supposed to get behind the wheel the first time, and he did anyway. He will do it again and again and again. I hope he stays in prison for the rest of his life so he doesn't hurt or kill anyone else.
Lauren Adams, WLKY News.
All right, and I appreciate WLKY News. And his sister indicated he's going to get out and do it again and again and again. And how many times have we done stories where somebody has went out of their way to show the judge that they're good, they're clean, they'll be good Samaritans, good citizens, they'll do the right thing, and yet they turn around 24 hours to 48 hours later and they end up getting hit with a DUI, or they crash and end up killing somebody, or they do something just stupid. They get behind the wheel when they shouldn't have. I've talked about it several times, and I believe it again. They're going to do it again and again and again because that's the pattern of the perpetrators. They get behind the wheel. It's just like they can just feel like they're invincible. They can't do anything wrong, and yet it's still, they end up doing something wrong each and every time. All right, you're listening to DistractedDriversBusted.com, the podcast show. Thank you very much for listening to the podcast show. I do appreciate it. I know I haven't been around doing as many as I've been in the past. We're going to try to work on that a little bit. Again, remember, I don't want to die. I don't want to die today. Do you? Until then, don't let anyone take the sands of time within your own hourglass.